grab one of these wood plaques from the Dollar Tree and transform it into some beautiful art. Let's start out by grabbing some Martha Stewart rose gold paint. And I'm going to take this paint and I'm just going to apply it around the outside perimeter of this piece of wood. And I just love how this metallic finish on this paint turns out. It gives it such a high-end look. Now, once everything has dried, I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, and I'm going to do a nice coat of paint over the top portion of this plaque. And once our paint has completely dried, I'm going to grab my Mod Podge in matte. We're going to paint a coat of this Mod Podge over the top of the white portion of this plaque. And while our Mod Podge is drying, we're going to prep our napkin. I found this napkin on Amazon and I fell in love with it because I have chickens at home and I just love this chicken decor. So this piece I felt was going to be really elegant and I just love this napkin. So if you like this napkin, please look down in my description box below. So we're just going to prep this napkin by removing the back 2 layers. And once we have the back 2 layers removed, I'm going to place this napkin on my plaque. And I am going to try to position it in a way that I can have 3 of those chickens on our plaque. And once I have that positioned where I would like, I take a piece of parchment paper and I lay that over the top. Next, I'm going to grab my iron and I'm just going to iron that napkin right onto the plaque. Now to remove that excess napkin, I grab my zip sander and I'm just going to sand in a downward motion around the whole entire plaque. And now that we have everything removed, I'm going to place this onto a paintable surface. And I'm going to take my Mod Podge Glossy Clear Acrylic Sealer, and that is a mouthful, and we're going to spray that over the top of our piece. And now that that is coated, we're just going to set this aside for about an hour to dry. And here is what it looks like after an hour. Now let's add a few pieces to our sign. I have these little canvases I got from Walmart and they come in a 3-pack and they're just little squares. I think they're like $1.70 for all 3 of them. So it's a very inexpensive piece. And I'm going to take one of these little canvases and I'm just going to tape it down to a paintable surface. Since it is really bright white, I'm going to add my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster over the top just to kind of mute it a little bit so it'll blend better with my chickens. And once that paint has completely dried, I grab this cute stencil. Now I got these stencils on Amazon in a little package of like 10 or 12 of them. And I just think these are so much fun. They're all Farmhouse themed. And so since this one said fresh eggs, I thought this would be a great one to use. So I'm just going to add that right over the square and it fits perfectly. And then I'm going back to that same metallic paint that we used earlier in gold rose. And I'm just going to put that over the top of my stencil. Next, we'll just go ahead and remove the stencil, and then I'll go wash that with some soap and warm water, and then that way I can reuse it again later. Now, while that is drying, I'm going to make a little frame for our piece. This is just a square dowel, and I get these on Amazon in a package. They're very reasonable priced, and I'm just going to stain this with my Waverly Antique Wax. Next, I'm going to go ahead and cut this dowel up. And I'm going to use my miter shears for this, and I'm just going to mark where I want to cut them, and I'm going to cut them at a 45-degree angle. Now, if you don't have miter shears, no problem. This wood is really easy to cut. I have cut this with a razor blade. I've actually also used just those $1.25 clippers from the Dollar Tree that you use for gardening. I keep a set of those in my craft room as well. So you can do that in different ways. You also don't have to frame this if you don't want to. Now, once my pieces are cut, I'm going to use my Type Bond Quick and Thick glue, and I'm just going to add that around the perimeter of my picture frame, and then we'll go ahead and add those little dowels. And here's what our frame looks like all done. I just love how this turns out. I think it gives it a nice rustic but elegant vibe. Now, before we add anything to the front of our piece, I do want to make a hanger for this. So I'm taking just some satin ribbon and I'm just going to make a basic hanger on the back side of our piece. And to attach this, I'm going to start out by just using my staple gun here, and I'm just going to staple that ribbon right onto the back side of this wood. And then to cover up those staples, I'm going to cut a little piece of the ribbon here, and I'm just going to glue it over the top of the staples. Now that our hanger is complete, we're just going to flip our piece over and let's add our little sign to the front. So to do this, I'm going to be using my quick and thick glue with a little bit of hot glue. And that's all there is to it. Our little chicken sign is complete for your fresh eggs. I just love how this turns out. The metallic with the decoupage and the small little sign on the front. It's just a fun little piece that you can make in an afternoon. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that like or subscribe button. Thank you. So walking down the aisles at the Dollar Tree, I found this St. Patrick's Day pot of gold, and I am going to transform this into a fun farmhouse decor piece. First, we're going to just tape this down to a paintable surface. Next, I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, and I'm going to just whitewash the black pot on this pot of gold. So once this has completely dried, I'm going to go ahead and grab my scissors and remove that hanger. Next, I grabbed this great blank that I had found at Walmart, and it was already stained. And I'm going to go ahead and just flip this over, and I grabbed a paint stick. And using some miter shears, I'm just going to go ahead and trim that paint stick down, and we're going to use this as a hanger. Now I grab my staple gun and we'll just go ahead and staple this down so we have a nice way to hang this piece. Now let's go ahead and flip this over, and I grabbed our little pot. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of pull that variegated metal away from the piece of wood that's on the front of this pot just a little bit. Once I've done that, I'm going to then grab my Tight Bond quick and thick glue. We're going to use this with a little bit of hot glue to attach our pot to our blank. And once I had it positioned where I would like it, I used a tile and a few bottles of paint to weigh this down. And I let this sit for about an hour. And once I removed everything, I thought that it would look better with a full coat of the plaster color paint. So we just went ahead and did that. Now, once our paint has completely dried, you'll notice that there's a little bit of room in that variegated metal and the wood piece on the front of that pot so that we can stick some florals in there. And I grabbed these florals from Walmart and I just went ahead and trimmed them up so that they would fit nicely in this pot. And these florals fit pretty snug in this pot, so I didn't need to use any hot glue, but if you felt like you needed to, you could do that. So once you are satisfied with your floral arrangement, I grabbed a little bit of Spanish moss, and I'm just going to go ahead and add that right underneath the flowers, between the flowers and the pot. And I felt like my moss needed a little bit of a haircut, so I went back in with some scissors and just trimmed it up a little bit. And for our final embellishment, I'm going to go ahead and hot glue a bow right to the front of our pot. And now our piece is complete, and I just love how this turns out. It has a wonderful farmhouse feel, and will be so lovely to display for the spring and summer season. I would love to hear from you. What flowers would you display in your piece? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that like or subscribe button. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you. Let's make a birdhouse, perfect for a tiered tray or a shelf sitter. We're starting out with this wood birdhouse that I found at the Dollar Tree, and I'm taking my Waverly Antique Wax and we're going to stain the birdhouse. We're going to stain the whole entire thing except for the roof. We're going to leave the roof completely bare. And once that wax has completely dried, we're going to take our Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm going to do a nice coat of the plaster color paint on the roof of this birdhouse. And once our paint has completely dried, I go ahead and I grab my Mod Podge. And for this project, we're going to be using the matte Mod Podge for this. Next, I'm going to paint that Mod Podge all over that roof. And I love these brushes. They're from Plaid, but they come in a 3-pack. They're great brushes for Mod Podge. So if you're looking for a brush for Mod Podge, I would try these. These work really well. Now, once that has dried, I'm going to take this little piece of rice paper and I'm going to fit it to the roof. And once I'm happy with the placement, I'm going to grab my parchment paper here. And I'm just going to lay the crease of the parchment paper right on top of the crease of the roof here. And I'm using my hot iron, and this is a little bit tricky, but I'm going to just iron each side of the roof with the rice paper. Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want to try using the iron with the roof. You could also just apply the rice paper when the Mod Podge is still wet and then use a piece of cling wrap. I just thought this would give it a little bit smoother look, and I felt brave enough to do this, but you need to be really careful not to burn yourself because it is a little bit tight in space. And now that your rice paper is attached to your birdhouse, I'm going to take my zip sander here and I'm going to sand in a downward motion to remove any of that excess rice paper. And now here's a quick look of what our little birdhouse is looking like. I now want to come back in with some Mod Podge, and I'm going to take that Mod Podge and do a nice light coat over the top of the rice paper to seal everything in. And once our Mod Podge has dried, I'm going to take one of these little birds, and I got these birds on Amazon in I think it was a 12-pack last year. I'll put a link for them down in my description box below if you're interested. And I just am going to hot glue that little bird right inside that birdhouse. And now this adorable birdhouse is complete. I just love how this turns out. This would be a great piece on its own in a tiered tray. You could also add a stand to it if you wanted to make it taller or give it some height on your shelf. So this could do a lot of fun things. It's such a versatile piece. Let me know what you think in the comments below. So for this piece, I'm starting out with some scrap wood. I'm going to be taking my antique wax from Waverly and I'm going to stain this board on the front and the back side. And if you haven't done this before, I'm just going to paint a little coat of the wax over the top of this piece of wood, and using a baby wipe, I'm just going to wipe this down. And then before I add anything to this board, I do let this dry for about an hour. And now here is where the fun comes in. I'm grabbing some of these number 20 biscuits, and you can get these at Lowe's, Amazon, Home Depot, any place that you might have wood pieces at. And I'm going to use 7 of these little biscuits. Next, I grab a paintable surface. This is just a small piece of cardboard, and I'm using some painter's tape here, and I'm just going to add that on in a straight line. And this will give me a place to be able to put those biscuits so they don't slide around when I paint them. Now I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we're going to paint all of these little biscuits on one side. And once our paint has dried, I grab my Mod Podge. This is matte Mod Podge, and I'm going to paint a coat of the Mod Podge over the top of each one of these biscuits. And while our Mod Podge is drying, we're going to prep our napkin. This napkin I found at Home Goods last fall, and I absolutely love this napkin. And I thought this would be really pretty on all of those biscuits. So we're going to start out by just removing the back 2 layers of this napkin. And I found that using painter's tape helps me get the back layers off of the napkin without ripping anything. Since we're going to be decoupaging these onto a smaller surface, I am going to be cutting this napkin into 4 quadrants so it's easier to work with. Now going back to those little biscuits, I am removing one of the biscuits and just taking it down to another level on our piece of cardboard. Now I'm going to place that napkin right over the top. And I really like the pattern on this napkin, and I wanted the little like V shape to be at the top of each one of these petals. So I'm just going to position the napkin where I would like it. Then I'll take a piece of parchment paper, lay that over the top. Then using my hot iron, I'm going to iron that napkin right on top of the biscuit. Now to remove the excess napkin, I'm taking my zip sander and we're just going to sand around the outside edge of this biscuit. And once we are satisfied, I just put this biscuit right back where I found it on the little piece of tape so we can seal that in later. Now we'll go ahead and just repeat this step for all 7 of these petals. And now that we have all of our petals decoupaged, I'm going to go ahead and grab my matte Mod Podge again, and we're going to use this to seal all of our petals in. Now, I did decide I wanted to add a few more embellishments to my piece, so I have these fun wood cutouts that I got at the Dollar Tree last fall, and I am just going to add these to my piece of cardboard here, and we'll repeat the same steps that we did on our biscuits. We're going to paint them with our Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, then we'll go ahead and use our Mod Podge and we'll add a coat. And once our Mod Podge has completely dried, we'll take that same napkin that we used earlier, and we're going to add our piece of parchment paper and iron these on. Next, we'll just grab our zip sander and go ahead and sand any excess napkin off of our little flowers. Now all that's left is sealing them with our Mod Podge. And now for my final embellishment, I am going to grab a little wood half bead, and I'm using my Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint. And this is a color blue, and we're just going to paint that little bead. And now that everything is dry, let's go ahead and put this together. I always like to start out by just positioning everything where I want it before I glue anything down. This just helps me visualize where each piece is going to go, so it makes it so much more simple when we're actually finalizing our piece. And to glue down our biscuits and our little half bead, I am going to be using Tight Bond Quick and Thick glue. I absolutely love this glue. It is such a fun glue to use, and it does dry clear, so that's very nice, and it dries very quickly. So if you wanted to try something different that wasn't hot glue, I'll leave a link for this in my description box below. Definitely give this a try. I really enjoy it. And now that all of our pieces are glued down to our board, I do need to make a stem. So I grabbed a piece of twine and I'm just burning off the little edges on here. I don't like all those little frays. And once we have our little stem measured out, I'm going to take that same Tight Bond Quick and Thick glue and we're going to glue that stem into place. And this quick and thick glue dries clear, so don't worry if you see any of the glue right now. It'll dry clear and look great. And now that our large flower has been glued down, let's go ahead and add our little flowers. And I'm just going to position them where I would like them, and using that quick and thick glue, we'll go ahead and we'll glue those down as well. And for the stems, I'm going to be doing the same thing that I did for our larger flower, except for I am using a smaller twine for this because I thought with the smaller flowers, we should use a smaller stem. Now, while our stems are drying, I am going to grab this fun stencil. This is a plaid stencil. I got this at Ben Franklin, but I've seen it on Amazon and other places as well. So I'm just going to add this Let Love Grow stencil to our piece. Next, I grab my stenciling brush and Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm just going to go ahead and tap that down onto our stencil. And now we just need to remove our stencil and let our paint dry. And for our final embellishment, I am taking this ribbon. I got this on Amazon and I can't remember. There was another creator that used this ribbon and I absolutely loved it and had to go buy some of it myself. And it is a fun ribbon to use. There's no wire or anything to it, but it's so whimsical, and I thought this would tie everything together on the bottom here. So I'm just going to tie a basic bow on the bottom of our piece. And once you're satisfied with your bow, I am just going to take some scissors and trim any excess off of the tails. And that is all there is to this piece. I just love how this piece turns out. It is such a fun rustic piece that you can do for the summertime and goes right into the fall. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this piece, leave a flower emoji down below. Thanks! Now for this piece, I'm using an item that I got at a garage sale, and it was just a wood plaque that said Mr., and I have a matching one that says Mrs. But I decided that I wanted to separate them and use them for different pieces. So for this one, I'm just going to take my zip sander and I'm just going to sand off as much of that black Mr. off of the sign. Now, once I have everything sanded the way that I would like, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm just going to give a nice light coat over the top of our piece. And once that has dried, I'm going to dry brush a little bit of my black chalk paint over the top as well. Just really going to do a light coat over this. But I'm also going to dry brush a little bit around the edge just to bring out that detail. And then smooth everything in. I did go back over with a little bit more plaster because I did get a little bit more black than I wanted on our piece. Once you're satisfied with the background, we're going to move on to our next step. So I had these wood hearts in my stash from Valentine's Day, and I decided I'm going to take 5 of them and I'm going to tape them down to a paintable surface. And I'm just using some painter's tape for this. This makes it a lot easier to paint our piece. Now I'm going to take that metallic rose gold paint from Martha Stewart and I'm going to paint all of these hearts. And while those were drying, I grabbed 5 more little hearts that I had in my stash, and I'm just going to tape them down to a paintable surface as well. And for these, I'm going to paint them black satin so that they have a little bit of a shimmer, but not too much. Now, while those pieces are drying, I did grab my Martha Stewart stencil. And these are a self-adhesive stencil as well. And I'm just going to take that small little piece there at the bottom, and I'm going to use it to make corners on my main piece here. And once I have my stencil in place, I am using my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. And I'm using a stencil brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and stencil this onto the corner here. And I I found with these stencil brushes, I just kind of tap really lightly over the top of the stencil, and I don't try to add too much paint if I don't need to. And then we're just going to remove that stencil and now repeat that on all 4 corners. And I just love how the stencil elevates our background. Now let's go ahead and put all of this together. Now off camera, I did paint a half bead the same color as my larger hearts. So we're just going to start out by just positioning our hearts, and I'm going to try to make them into a beautiful flower here. So you'll see me just laying everything out before we glue anything in place, just to get everything right where we would like it. Next, we grab our Type Bond Quick and Thick glue, and we're just going to glue everything down. And now that everything is in place, we're going to let this dry for a few minutes before we move on to our next step. Now let's go ahead and place our little black hearts in the center of our flower. I'm just doing the same thing. I'm just going to position them where I would like them first. Then we'll take our Type Bond Quick and Thick glue and glue these all into place. Next, we'll glue that little half bead right in the center of our hearts. Now you could leave this just how it is, but I wanted to go ahead and cover up those little holes that were there on those hearts. So I'm taking some hot glue and these little metal brads that I had in my stash, and I'm just going to add those to the circle to fill those in. And now our piece is complete. I just love how this turns out. This was so much fun putting together different things that I had in my craft room and make a beautiful piece. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Would you use hearts to make a flower? This gem has been in my stash for quite some time. I love galvanized metal and I want to do something fun with this. So I'm taking my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm just going to paint a coat inside of the heart. And I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I am only going to paint about a ½ inch away from the edge on here. And once that is dry, I will repeat for a second coat. This beautiful welcome napkin I found at HomeGoods and just had to get this. It's been in my stash for a while now, and I wanted to use this with the heart. So what I'm going to do here is I'm taking some painter's tape and I'm just going to remove the back 2 layers of the napkin. Next, I'm going to grab some water and a paintbrush, and I'm just going to paint around the welcome with my paintbrush and water. And then I'll slightly tear the napkin just so that it has a nice rough edge. And I think this makes it look so much nicer when we're putting it on items. Just got that softer edge and rustic feel. This step is optional, but I was impatient and I used my heat dryer just to dry the edges so I could go on to my next step. So let's grab our Mod Podge and that heart. And I'm using matte Mod Podge for this, but you can use whatever you'd like. And I'm going to paint a coat of the Mod Podge over the top of that paint after I move that little string so it doesn't get in the way. And then we'll go ahead and just lightly set down this napkin on top. And I'm just making sure it's going to fit there. I probably should have done that before I did the Mod Podge, but it looks like it's going just fine here. And this way I know where to put the Mod Podge. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just going to lightly set that down, and I'm grabbing a piece of cling wrap, and I'll take that and I will press everything into place. And I did not get me pressing the cling wrap down on top of this napkin, but you just take a piece of cling wrap and you just tap it down to make sure all the wrinkles are out. Now, once you're done with that, you'll see me here taking a little bit of that Mod Podge just to make sure that the edges are laying down, because few of the spots I did not have enough Mod Podge down. So this will just allow everything to lay down flat. And once that is completely dry, I will do a coat of Mod Podge over the top just to seal the whole entire project in. Now, while that's drying, I'm going to get this lavender piece, and I found these at Dollar Tree, and they tend to have them usually every spring. And these are one of my favorite picks from the Dollar Tree. I'm not a huge fan of all of their picks, but this one is really nice. And what I'm trying to do here and show you is that the leaves on this pick were kind of scooched all the way down toward the bottom of the stem. And what I did was I pushed one of the sets of leaves up toward the lavender so that way I could cut a smaller piece. For this project, I'm only using 2 of the lavender stems. Now, I have this ribbon from Walmart, and I get them at Christmas time. I really like the quality of this ribbon. I tend to grab quite a few rolls right when the Christmas items come out. My Walmart tends to sell out of them pretty quickly, so I rarely am able to get this on clearance. But at $2.49 a roll, I am happy with that price because this ribbon I can use all year round. So for this bow, all I did was a double loop on either side, and then in the center, I attached it with about a half a piece of pipe cleaner, and I'm going to leave the tails of the pipe cleaner on there for later on. You'll see why. And we're going to dovetail the tails on the bow to make it look all pretty. Now for our next step here, I am going to take my lavender and kind of crisscross it to make it look like a swag. And I'm using some of my floral tape, and I'm just going to wrap that to make sure it stays into place. And I kind of have to twist that a little bit because I want it to be more of an X shape because we're going to put this at the top of our heart. And then I take that bow, and this is where you see me using that pipe cleaner. I'm able to just wrap that pipe cleaner around the center of our swag so that it all stays into place. Now, for my last step here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut about maybe 1.5 inch, 2-inch piece of ribbon, and I end up folding this in thirds-ish. So I'm folding either ends on the side so you don't see that wire and you only see the pretty part of the bow. And then I take some hot glue and I wrap this around to the back side, and this will cover the pipe cleaner and just ensure that everything stays into place. And here's our beautiful little swag. I just love how this turns out. Next, I just take some hot glue, and on the top center of this heart, I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue and attach the swag. And this is just a simple little piece that you can put together, and it has that farmhouse rustic feel to it, but I think you could put this almost anywhere. You could put it on in the kitchen, on a tiered tray, hang it on a door. It just is very versatile. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you'd like to comment, leave a comment below. And if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that subscribe or like button. Thank you. So this wood piece is a newer piece in my stash. I did get this a few months ago. It was called a wood coaster. And a few weeks ago, I found these wood peg dolls at the Dollar Tree, and these are newer items. One of the things that I did notice on these is that some of them were different heights. So you got 2 smaller ones and 2 larger ones in each of the packages. The 2 smaller ones match identically, and the 2 larger ones are the same height, but they look a little bit different. So please be mindful of that when you're buying these packages. You may need to buy a few to get the combination that you want. For this project, I'm going to use 4 of the smaller pegs. And what I'm going to use to attach this is just a little bit of wood glue and some hot glue. I'm just going to position them as evenly as I can around the base of this coaster. I set this aside to dry for about 2 hours before I did anything else. Now, once everything was dry, I grabbed my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and a chip brush. I also grabbed a little spray bottle that I could spray some water with, and these come in a little 2-pack from the Dollar Tree. This has been really useful. I just sprayed down my piece with the water, and then I went over it with the brush to give it more of a lighter coat, and it would thin everything out. And this way I wasn't trying to mix anything up, and I wasn't putting too much water in. And if it got too wet, I could just dry it off with a paper towel. So this gave a nice stained look to my piece. Do flip this over and do the bottom side as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and use this beautiful napkin for this piece. I just love this napkin. And all we're going to do is we're going to unwrap it, flip it over, and pull the back 2 layers of the napkin off. You just want that top layer. Next, I'm just going to lay this over the top of my riser here, and I'm trying to decide what parts of the flowers that I want on top of the riser. And I just kind of move this around. This is completely up to you. You can use any napkin you like for something like this. It's just a lot of fun decoupaging on different things. Once we got our piece figured out that we want to cut out, I'm just going to roughly cut around the outside edge on here. And I want some overhang because you'll see what I'm going to do here in a little bit. You don't want to have it too small. It'd be better for it to be too big. Go ahead and set that napkin aside for a minute and grab some Mod Podge. I am going to use the matte Mod Podge, but you can use whatever Mod Podge you'd like. I just prefer more matte finish for something like this. And all I'm going to do is do a really nice light coat of Mod Podge over the top of this coaster. And I'm just doing the inside portion of the circle. Now let's go ahead, and while this is still wet, we'll grab our napkin and position it on top. And once you lay that down, I'm going to use a piece of cling wrap, and I'm going to just smush that down and just pat out any of the wrinkles. Then go ahead and just set this aside to dry for a little bit. Once everything is dry, I'm going to take the same Mod Podge and I'm going to just do a sealing coat on the inside circle only. We do not want to put any of that Mod Podge on the excess paper. Now, once your Mod Podge has completely dried, I am taking my zip sander and I am just going to sand in a downward motion and sand all of that excess paper off of the napkin. If you don't have a zip sander, an emery board or a sanding block or a piece of sandpaper will do the same thing. Just leave this alone, but I did flip this over and I grabbed some of this folk art flat paint, and I'm really loving this flat paint. If you're a matte person or don't like a lot of shine, these paints are amazing. I am using the color Crushed Stone. It's kind of a grayish brown, light brown color. It looks amazing. It's a very great neutral color, and I'm just going to paint all of the pegs this color. Now, after doing this, I could have painted these pegs before I glued everything together, but I did not. But this works just fine, so I just took a small paintbrush and I painted these to look beautiful. Now here's our final piece. I love how this turns out. This is just so rustic but bright and cheery. Can't wait to display this. Who doesn't love a quick and easy canvas craft? This is going to start out with a 5x7 canvas that I got at the Dollar Tree. And we're going to grab some painter's tape and I'm just going to frame out the canvas. Now once we have that all in place, let's grab our napkin, and you can use any napkin you like. I found these beautiful Martha Stewart napkins at Home Goods, and I really enjoyed the spring colors in this, which is why I chose this napkin. And to prep this napkin, I just unfolded it and pulled the back 2 layers of the napkin off, so we're only using that top layer. Since we're using a small canvas, we're only going to use one of these butterflies. Instead of cutting the napkin, I'm going to use the water method, which is where we take a paintbrush and we're just going to put a little bit of water on the paintbrush and draw around what we'd like out of the napkin and tear the napkin. Once we have our napkin piece ready, I'm going to do a quick fit check on the canvas. And I realized I'm going to need to cut a little bit more off of the napkin. So we just do that same method where we're tearing the napkin until it fits perfectly inside our rectangle. And if you're enjoying this video and haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Thanks! So now that we have a napkin that will fit right into our rectangle, I'm going to take my Mod Podge and I'm painting a nice coat of Mod Podge in the center of that rectangle. And now very carefully, I'm going to set that napkin right in the center of our canvas. Now let's place a layer of cling wrap over the top of the napkin. And by doing this, we can easily straighten out and do any smoothing of the napkin on the canvas while the Mod Podge is still wet. Now, once the Mod Podge is completely dry, I go ahead and I grab my Mod Podge again and do a coat to cover the top of the napkin. Next, let's go ahead and grab some Sugar Metallic Sandcastle paint. And this paint is amazing. It goes so well with that napkin. So I'm going to use that to blend the canvas in with the napkin around the outside edge, going up to that blue painter's tape. And now once that has dried, I went ahead and I grabbed my Waverly paint in the color Sandstone, and I did the exact same thing, just a lighter coat of the paint over the top of our metallic paint. And once that was completely dried, I actually went back over and did a lighter coat with the Sugar Metallic. And between these two paints, it just blended in amazing. And now it's time to remove that blue painter's tape. Now time for some embellishments. I found these adorable wood stickers at the Dollar Tree, and I pulled the one off that says hello. Now, the sticker part didn't stay on them very well, so I am going to have to glue this. I placed the hello on a paintable surface, and I grabbed my Folk Art Sugar Metallic Smoky Quartz paint. And we're going to give that hello a nice coat of paint. Now for some finishing touches. What we're going to do for this hello sign is I'm going to take my Mod Podge and I'm just going to paint a nice little rectangle in this corner of my painting, because I want that to be nice and flush to the painting. So then we'll just set that hello sticker over the top, which doesn't have any stickies left, and it should hold up just fine. Next, I grab my hot glue gun and just put a little bead of hot glue at the top corner, and then I just add a quick little bow right at the top. Now our little hello sign is complete. Wow, I love how this turns out. This is just so adorable. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's transform these two Dollar Tree signs and make a beautiful decor piece for the spring. I'm going to start out by taking this porch sign and I'm going to put it onto a paintable surface. We're going to flip this over and remove the hanger. I will be reusing the hanger, so I'm going to save that aside. Next, I grab my heat tool and I'm going to take a scraping tool and just remove the sticker from the back side of this sign. And once the sticker is removed, I did go ahead and sand this down to make sure everything was nice and smooth. And now that our piece is prepped, we're going to grab our Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm going to just paint 2 coats of paint over the top of this piece. Now, while this is drying, I went back to my other sign and I deconstructed it and removed the letters and that cute little flower. And I did use the bunny in a recent craft, so if you'd like to see that, I'll put the card for it right here. Go ahead and save that to watch after you've seen this video. So next, I'm just going to take some painter's tape, and I flipped all of the letters over and added the painter's tape. And this is going to allow for me to add this onto a piece of cardboard to make it really easy to paint the tops and the sides of each of these letters. So I decided to go a little bit bold on these letters, and I'm using the color Aqua by Folk Art, and I'm going to paint all of these letters on the top and along the sides because you'll still see them on the sign. Now let's go back to that little flower, and I wanted to take that flower and I'm just going to tape it down to a paintable surface here, and I'm taking that same aqua colored paint We're going to paint the center of the flower that aqua color just to tie the letters right in. Now, while all that paint is drying, I grabbed the little pick that I found at the Dollar Tree, and it's kind of like a greenery with a little bit of yellow balls all over it. And I just liked the spring look that this had. And I'm going to cut 4 little pieces off of this and make a cute swag. And if you've never made one of these before, they're super simple. You just go ahead and you grab some floral tape and you're going to take your picks. And I'm just going to wrap this up using the floral tape. And I'm going to wrap 2 of the picks together to start. And then I'll wrap the other 2 and then connect them. And now that our beautiful swag is all ready to go, let's go ahead and make a cute bow. I'm going to use this fun ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I think this has to be one of my favorite ribbons that they carry most of the time all year round. It is just a nice polka dotted burlap ribbon, and I find that it goes with a lot of different things and is a fairly high quality product for a Dollar Tree item. So what you see me doing is I am cutting 4 strips that are 12 inches in length. Now with 3 of these strips, I'm going to make a loop. And all I'm going to do is use a little bit of hot glue to attach the loop together. Once we have all of our loops made, I take that 4th strip and I'm going to kind of fold it in a way to make it look like a V. And then I grab the ribbon again and I just cut another small strip that was about 2 inches in length. Next, I'm going to go ahead and grab my loops and I'm going to just squish them together and make a really pretty bow. And I'm just going to hold that together in the center with my thumb and my index finger until I am happy with how it looks. And that V is going to be our little tails for our bow. And I'm using a small piece of pipe cleaner, but you could also tie this together with a string. And I'm going to wrap that around the center and then go ahead and tighten that as best as I can. Then I do a quick little fluff of the bow. Now to cover up that pipe cleaner, I'm going to take that other piece of ribbon here and I'm going to fold it into thirds. And then all I do is I wrap that around the center of that pipe cleaner and I take it to the back and I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue and pinch it into place. And now you have a quick and easy bow. For the last step, all I did was I went ahead and I dovetailed the tails, but you could also diagonal cut them or just leave them the way that they are. Now going back to our original piece, we are going to take some Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle and just distress this board. And then we're just going to reattach the hanger. Now let's go ahead and add our letters. First, I'm going to just lay them out and just space them the way that I want. And I really like using this straight edge that I got from the Dollar Tree. It is probably one of my most used items from the Dollar Tree for doing crafts. It's kind of something that you don't think about buying, but once you buy it and have it, it is so amazing to have in your stash. Then I'm going to use this to just straighten out everything at the bottom for 1 inch. Now I'm going to grab my quick and thick Titebond glue and I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the back side of these letters. And I'm just going to use a paintbrush to help paint this on just to make sure it covers the whole entire thing. And once we have our first letter attached to our board, I'm just going to continue to repeat this step until I've attached all of the letters. And then I let this sit for about 20 minutes and now I'm going to add the rest of our pieces. So let's start out by attaching the swag. So using some hot glue, I'm going to attach the swag right above the R and the I. Now we're going to grab our bow and let's fluff that out and then attach that right to the center of our swag. And now for our final touch, let's go ahead and hot glue that beautiful flower to the center of our bow. And wow, I just love how this sign turns out. It definitely is a step up from the Dollar Tree signs and gives a nice spring touch for your decor pieces. And if you like this piece, just hit that like button down below and let me know. Thanks! So I walked by this basket in the Dollar Tree a few different times, and I finally just picked it up and said, no, I am going to make this over. I think this would be a really cute piece. Something that you could make over and fill with different things for different seasons. So for this season, I'm going to fill it with some carrots, but they are going to be removable, so that way I can fill it with different items later on. I was thinking that maybe I could fill it with lemons or with strawberries or something different for different seasons, so that I have a piece that I could put on a tiered tray or on a shelf that could kind of be an all-year piece, but could be customizable to the different seasons. So to start out, I'm just going to remove everything from the frame of this basket. So now we're going to grab some Dollar Tree rope, and we're going to take that rope and wrap it around our basket. And I'll use a little bit of hot glue to make sure that everything stays into place. I found that it was easier for me to start from the bottom of the basket and work my way up to the top and then do the handle. So as you can see, once I get up to the top of this basket, I do run out of rope from that first roll of rope. So I do have to cut off that little piece of plastic there because I don't want that to show on the outside of my basket. And I'm just going to hot glue that back into place, and then I'll just match up the remaining piece of rope to that piece. And I'll keep this on the back side of my basket, but you actually really don't see this because we're going to put a rim around the basket, so this will not be a big deal if you left that plastic piece on. And now we just continue wrapping the rope around the handle of the basket until everything is wrapped. And once you have your final piece of rope in place, we can just glue that and cut any excess rope off. And now the fun part. This is completely optional, but I like to take a lighter and burn off any of those extra fuzzy pieces on the rope just to make it a little bit more polished. Now for the rim of my basket, I am going to take a piece of scrap fabric here, and I am just going to trim about a 2.5-inch strip. It doesn't have to be perfect. As you can see, I am not making perfect lines here at all. And I'm using my hot glue, and I'm going to take and fold this into thirds so that you can't see any of the edges. And I'm just going to go ahead and tack this down really lightly with the hot glue. And once we have our fabric rim all glued together, I'm going to set that aside for a moment, and we'll go back to that basket. When you look inside the basket, there's these little spikes in there that were used to hold those eggs that were in there originally. So I'm just going to come in with some sharp scissors and just trim those out because we don't need those in our basket. Now I'll grab that piece of fabric again, and I'll do a quick fit check to make sure it's going to fit around my basket like I would like. And using my Elaine's fabric tacky glue, I'm going to go ahead and attach the fabric around the basket. And I'm doing it with the fabric glue instead of the hot glue because of the type of fabric I'm using, because it has those little holes in there and it's a thinner fabric. And I felt like if I used the hot glue gun, I was going to get a lot of bumps. And I didn't want that. I wanted it to look as natural as possible, which is why I did this extra step by using a glue that takes a little longer to seal. And I'm going to keep those in place by using my little pink clips that I got at the Dollar Tree. I only had to have this clip for about an hour, and then I was able to take those clips off and move on to my next step. But this is just an extra step. If you're using a thicker fabric, hot glue would work just fine. And now once your fabric glue has dried, I'm going to go ahead and remove our clips. And we could just leave the basket the way it is, but we are going to add those carrots that I talked about earlier. And to do that, I grabbed this carrot package that I got at the Dollar Tree, And I love the look of the twine wrapped carrots, but I really don't like the way that they do their carrot tops. And I've seen a lot of other creators do this, and I've done this as well, where you remove the carrot tops and you add something else. So for this one, I am going to be removing those carrot tops, and I'll be adding some boxwood. And I'm just going to insert that boxwood in with a little bit of hot glue so it stays into place. And since I'm definitely a bow person, I went ahead and made a twine bow for each of my carrots, and I'll just hot glue that right underneath the carrot top. And once I added my carrots into the basket, I thought it looked great, but I also thought it needed a little bit more. So I went back to my stash and I found a little flower here, and I'm just going to hot glue that to the front of my basket. And I think that's just the perfect finishing touch. It's a neutral add, so I can still change out whatever is inside my basket. And I just love how this turns out. Let me know in the comments below what you would put inside this basket. I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what's stopping you? Hit that like or subscribe button below. It's free and it helps my channel grow. Thank you. The Dollar Tree always has some fun new things in the spring, and this is one of them, one of these beautiful wood trays. So let's jump right in with this beautiful stencil that I have from Amazon. And I got this in like a 9-pack. These are really small stencils. And I wanted to use the words grown locally. So I'm going to center that along the bottom of this tray. And then I'm taking some painter's tape and I'm just going to cover up the carrots because I don't want to accidentally paint those carrots onto the tray. Now the chalk paste I'm going to be using is redesigned chalk paste and the color is vintage lace. I'm just going to squeegee that over the top of our stencil. And then once that is all done, we'll go ahead and remove the stencil, which is the best part. And now let's just set that aside to dry. While that is drying, I grabbed one of these carrot cutouts and a napkin. And I'm going to take some Mod Podge here, and this Mod Podge is matte finish, and we're just going to brush the Mod Podge over the top of our carrot. And once I have a nice layer of Mod Podge, I'm just going to set this aside to dry. Now going back to our napkin, I found this napkin at Home Goods in the fall, and I really loved just that print on it, and it reminded me of carrots. So I am going to go ahead and prep this napkin. And to do that, I'm just taking a little piece of painter's tape and I am going to remove the back 2 layers of the napkin. And since we're using a smaller carrot here, I don't need this whole napkin, so I'm just going to trim the napkin a little bit to make it a little easier to work with. Now I just go ahead and I lay that napkin over the top of our carrot. And then I'm taking a piece of parchment paper. We'll lay that right over the top of the napkin. And using a hot iron, I'm just going to iron that napkin right onto where we painted that Mod Podge. Next, I grab my zip sander and I'm going to sand in a downward motion to remove any of that excess napkin. Now we'll grab our Mod Podge again, and I'm going to paint a coat over the top of the napkin to seal everything in. Now I wanted to add some greenery to this, and so I grabbed one of my picks, and I believe this is a berry pick that I got from Walmart, and I'm just going to take some of the green leaves off of it. And next I grab my Waverly Antique Wax and I'm going to just stain the top of my carrot. But because I got a little of that Mod Podge on there, you can see that that stain did not want to take where the Mod Podge was. So I decided to grab some green paint instead, and I went ahead and I just painted over the top of that, just in case anything wanted to show through when I put those greenery pieces on. Now to attach these greenery pieces onto my carrot, I did have to trim them pretty close to the leaves because I didn't want any extra stem there. And then what I ended up doing was adding the hot glue to the wood piece, the carrot top. And then I'm just going to set those pieces of greenery right on top of that hot glue. Now, doing it this way is great, except for you need to make sure you go really quick because that hot glue dries quickly on that cold surface. So I was going as quick as I could to make sure everything stuck into place. And for our final addition, I'm just going to add a quick twine bow to the top of our carrot. Going back to our wood tray, I needed to find a way to hang this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this over, and I'm just going to hand screw in a little sawtooth hook. And now that we have a way to hang our piece, I'm going to flip this back over, and we're going to add our carrot to our tray. And I'm just going to use my Titebond glue with a little bit of hot glue to attach. And now our beautifully locally grown carrot is ready to display. I just love how this turns out. It has such a nice, fun farmhouse feel, but can transition from Easter into the whole entire summer for decor. And for those gardeners out there, this is a great decor piece as well. Carrots are one of my favorite things to grow in my garden. Do you guys grow carrots in your garden? Let me know by dropping a carrot down below. So who doesn't love a great decor piece? We're going to start out this project with a Dollar Tree frame, and this is an 8x10 frame. We're only going to use the frame on the outside and the backing, so you can save the glass and the insert for another craft. Next, I'm going to grab some craft sticks. And these are bigger than popsicle sticks, but smaller than tongue depressors. They're that medium-sized craft stick that you can find at the Dollar Tree, but any size will work just fine. And I'm using my clippers from the Dollar Tree, and these were just in the garden section, and they work really well in cutting these craft sticks. So we're going to just snip the ends off of these craft sticks, and we're going to do some variety of sizes and just lay them out on our backing. And some of them I'll do like 3 pieces and others I'll do 4, but I'm just gonna vary it up so it doesn't look the same. Just wanted to note that all of these creations today were inspired by Lisa at Crafting My Best Life with Lisa. So I'm going to link her in my description box below. Please check her out and give her some love. Thanks! So now that we have all of our craft sticks laid out, I had a little bit of an overhang on either end of the backing. So what I did before I glued anything down was I took a pencil and I just marked a line on either side, just so when we started gluing things down, I knew where the edges were that I wanted to keep everything centered. Now we're just going to remove those craft sticks from our backing and keep them in the order we want to glue them down in. And if you have any rough edges, you can just take a little piece of sanding paper or a sanding block. I'm using my zip sander and I'm just going to sand those down. This next step, I'm using some Elmer's glue, but some tacky glue would work just fine. And I just poured a little bit in a bowl so it'll be easier for me to spread with the paintbrush. And using a paintbrush, I'm just going to paint about a 1.5 to 2 inch piece so that I can do little rows at a time and not overwhelm myself trying to do the whole thing really quickly. And then I start laying out my craft sticks, and I make sure to use that pencil mark that I made earlier to line up my first row. And we're just going to keep repeating the steps until we fill the whole entire piece of the backing. And now that we have all of our craft sticks in place, I'm going to take our backing and flip it over and put a book on top of it and let it sit for about an hour to dry. Now that our piece is dry, let's go ahead and move it to a paintable surface. And I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle, and we're going to coat all of our craft sticks. And for this project, 1 coat of the Truffle paint will be plenty. And once that's completely dry, I grab my plaster colored paint from Waverly Chalk, And we're going to dry brush a heavy coat over the top of these craft sticks. And once this is dry, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and I'm just going to do a very light dry brush with that color over the top just to give it a little bit more dimension. Now once everything is dry, I go ahead and put this in the vertical position, and I double check to make sure that I have this the right side up. And now I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle and a detailing brush. And now we're just going to paint a very simple tree. We're just going to do the branches and the trunk. Now once your tree is completely dry, I'm grabbing some Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm just going to put it on a little piece of scrap cardboard here. Next, I'm going to take some of my Waverly chalk paint in the color Red, and we're going to add that to the plaster, and we're going to come up with a very pretty pink. And once you're satisfied with the color, I'm going to grab a sponge. And funny story here, I could not find a sponge in my craft room, so I went and asked my husband if he had a sponge, and he had one for his soldering set, so he let me borrow it for this craft. And since I was using this for painting, I ended up ordering him another sponge for his soldering set, and we'll keep this one in the craft room for future crafts. So we're just going to lightly sponge all over the branches. And then I did do a few along the bottom just so that it looked like the flowers were falling from the tree. And once this is completely dry, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ballet, and we're just going to do the exact same thing going over the dark pink. I'm going to grab my heat tool and dry everything again, and once it's completely dry, I'll grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we're going to repeat the same steps, but just very lightly going over with that plaster, just to give it a little bit more dimension. And now that everything is dry, I go ahead and grab my frame. And at first I was going to keep the frame white, but I decided that I really wanted something a little bit darker. So we're going to paint this with the color Truffle from Waverly chalk paint. And I was going to do 2 coats of paint, but I decided I liked the look of it after 1 coat of paint with a little bit of streaks in it. So we're just going to do it that way. And once everything was completely dry, I took the frame outside and I sprayed it down with some of this Rust-Oleum clear matte enamel. And this stuff works great. Now while that's drying, let's go back to our painting. I grabbed my Mod Podge in matte because I don't want a shiny finish. And we're going to just seal the whole entire painting using that Mod Podge. And now that both pieces are completely dry, I'm going to put them together. We'll add that frame right back to our painting. And wow, this piece turns out stunning. This is definitely a beginner-friendly craft, but looks amazing and looks like this was professionally done. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. So I grabbed a piece of cardboard and I'm going to put some of my paint on it. We're going to start out with the Vintage Tea Rose paint from Folk Art. Next, I add some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ballet. And now I'm going to add some of my red Waverly chalk paint as well. I'm not going to use the red as it is. I'm going to mix in some of my plaster paint with that. And I really like the color pink I get mixing the plaster paint with this red. And now I'm going to take my little bundles of Q-tips and I'm going to use them in the different color paints. And we're just going to add them to our stems to make cute little cherry blossoms. we just keep repeating this with the different layers of paint until we get a nice little cherry blossom look on our vase. Then I decided I wanted to add a little bit of pink to the rim, so I'm using a Q-tip and I'm just going to go. So now that we have our frame of our tree all done, I'm going to grab some regular jute cord, and this one is from Walmart. It's a little bit thicker jute cord, and we're going to just go ahead and we're going to wrap around the trunk to start. And this is going to take a little bit. It does take quite a bit of jute. So I tied it at the bottom, and I'm just going to wrap that up and around until I get the size of a trunk that I would like. And once I have our trunk, we're going to take some more of that jute, and I'm just going to wrap it around each one of these branches, kind of doing the same thing as I did earlier. So I'll tie a knot at the end closest to the trunk and stuff that knot inside of the trunk and hot glue it into place so nobody can see it. And then I'm just going to wrap that twine all the way around each one of the branches until I'm satisfied with how it looks. And while wrapping twine can be easy to do, it did take me about 45 minutes to wrap this tree. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that subscribe button below. Thanks! Now let's transform this into a cherry blossom tree. I have some leftover wine corks, and I'm just going to slice them here on my little green mat. And I'm going to slice them as thin as I can with my razor blade. And for this craft, I ended up using 4 wine corks. Going back to our tree, I flipped this over a few times to figure out which side I want to be the front of this tree in this piece. And once I have that decided, we're going to go back and grab those wine corks we cut. And using some hot glue, I'm just going to place these wine corks sporadically throughout the tree, and then I'm going to place a little bit on the bottom just to look like the flowers have fallen off of the tree. And now that we have all of our wine corks placed on the tree, I'm going to grab my Folk Art Matte Vintage Tea Rose Pink. And we're going to use this, and I'm just going to put a little bit of it in a bowl. Starting out with the pink paint, and I'm using a sponge brush. And we're just going to use that brush and tap that pink paint all over those wine corks. Once we're satisfied with the pink paint, we let that dry for a few moments, and I'm going to grab out my Waverly chalk paint and plaster. Next, we're going to take a round brush and just tap a little bit of that plaster paint on each one of those wine corks. And this will just give it a little bit more of a realistic look. And once the paint has dried, I flip this over, and I'm going to add a ribbon to the back to make a little hook. And to attach it, I'm just using hot glue and my staple gun. And here is what it looks like. Wow, this is so cute. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Let's make a decorative vase with a twist. I'm starting out with this little vase that I got at Walmart and some old greeneries that I had from Christmas time. The key with the greeneries is just pick one that you can use that can lay flat on your vase. So what I'm having to do here is I'm going to be trimming some of the smaller pieces off of this greenery so it will lay flat, because I really wanted something that looked like branches on my vase. Now, once we have all of our branches cut, I go ahead and grab my vase and my greeneries. I actually grabbed an egg carton as well, and I'm going to place the vase in the egg carton just to make it a little bit easier to hold. And I started out by trying to add this greenery with E6000, and yeah, that was a mess. That did not work out. So we switched over to hot glue. And all we're trying to do here is just attach all of these greeneries onto the bottom part of our vase. And since I want these to look like cherry blossoms, I'm making mine kind of look like trees. And when all of these little branches are attached, this is what it looks like. So next we're going to go ahead and use our Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and paint this vase all around the outside. And I did 2 coats of paint on this vase. And here is what it looks like. Put this down on a paintable surface and I grab my truffle paint from Waverly. And we're going to do a nice little coat of paint over the top of the branches. Next, we're going to grab our Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and just do a quick dry brush over the top of the branches to give it a little more dimension. I'm going to grab that egg carton again and place the vase down on that. And I also grabbed a few Q-tips and I'm going to rubber band 5 Q-tips together. So I grabbed a piece of cardboard and I'm going to put some of my paint on it. We're going to start out with the Vintage Tea Rose paint from Folk Art. Next, I add some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ballet. And now I'm going to add some of my red Waverly chalk paint as well. I'm not going to use the red as it is. I'm going to mix in some of my plaster paint with that. And I really like the color pink I get mixing the plaster paint with this red. And now I'm going to take my little bundles of Q-tips and I'm going to use them in the different color paints. And we're just going to add them to our stems to make cute little cherry blossoms. Then we just keep repeating this with the different layers of paint until we get a nice little cherry blossom look on our vase. Then I decided I wanted to add a little bit of pink to the rim, so I'm using a Q-tip and I'm just going to go around the outside of the rim. And once I completed this, I thought, wow, this is really pink, so maybe I should mute it out a little bit. And so I used a little bit of that plaster over the top so it would just lightly show through. So using that egg carton again and some Mod Podge in matte, we're going to go ahead and set the vase down on the egg carton. And I'm using a big brush here and I'm going to do a nice coat of Mod Podge over the entire side of this vase. And once that has completely dried, I'll flip the vase over and do the opposite side with the Mod Podge. This will just allow everything to seal in and to stay on to the vase and not chip off easily. So now to find something to fill our vase. I found these little berries at Hobby Lobby and they were $1.99 a pick, but I got them after Christmas and so they were 75% or 90% off. So it was a really good deal. So I'm going to grab 2 of these picks and I'm going to go ahead and add them to our vase. And wow, this turns out so elegant. You would never know that we transformed this dollar vase from Walmart into a beautiful piece of art. So I found this beautiful napkin at Home Goods last week, and I'm taking some wood ornaments from the Dollar Tree and we're going to put them together to make a beautiful Easter treat. So let's get started. Using some Waverly chalk paint in the color white, we're going to give a nice coat of paint to our little carrot here. And once that paint has completely dried, I grab some Mod Podge and we're just going to give another coat of Mod Podge over the top of the paint. And now that our Mod Podge is completely dried, I grab that napkin from Home Goods and I'm going to go ahead and remove the back 2 layers of the napkin. And I use a piece of painter's tape to assist me, especially with that second layer. It does take a little bit of work to get that off of our napkin. And the napkin is almost translucent once you've done doing that. But you can totally see the pattern once you put that over the top of our white paint. Now let's grab a piece of parchment paper and lay that over the top of the napkin. I'm using a heat press, but you can use a hot iron as well. I've used those in the past. And you just go ahead and you iron on the napkin. So I'm going to trim the remainder of the napkin off of this little carrot, and I'll save that napkin to use on my little bunnies. Next, I grab a zip sander, or you could just grab a sanding block, and I sand around the edges of our little carrot. Now go ahead and grab some Mod Podge and we're going to paint that over the top of the napkin to seal everything in. And now that we have the carrot done, we're going to go ahead and repeat this step for our little bunnies. Now, I started out with the bunnies facing the same direction, and I realized halfway through the craft that I wanted the bunnies to be looking at each other. So I ended up having to make a third bunny to make sure I had ones that were looking the opposite direction and looking at could look at each other. So while our bunnies and carrots are drying, let's go ahead and make some embellishments. I'm starting out here with some white yarn from the Dollar Tree and using the little pom-pom maker. This one came in a 2-pack, and this is the smaller pom-pom maker that came with the 2-pack. I go ahead and I start wrapping my yarn around that little pink flap that comes out. And you just wrap that all the way around until you're satisfied with the thickness. And then I go ahead and I cut the piece of yarn and then repeat the same step on the other side of the pom-pom maker. Once you have both of your little wraps done on your little pink arms, we'll go ahead and we'll fold this in together to make a circle. And for the next step here, you really want a pair of sharp pointy scissors. And I take those scissors and I'm just going to insert that into the little groove that's in that pink flap. And you just cut the string as you go along. And make sure you're holding this tight because right now you haven't tied anything together yet. Then I take a small piece of the yarn, about 5 inches, and we're going to go ahead and just insert that in the groove all the way around and then tie a knot. I tied it 3 times because I really wanted to make sure that stayed tight. And once you've done that, you go ahead and just remove the little pom-pom maker. It kind of comes apart, but you just put it back together. It snaps back in place. And then I take those same sharp scissors and we just give a little haircut on our pom-pom until we're happy with how it looks. If you've watched my videos in the past, I used to use an iron when I did my decoupage. And this Christmas, I splurged and bought a little heat press on Amazon. And I was pleasantly surprised when I got it that the plug on it was the exact same plug that I have on my glue gun. And this worked out amazing since I am very short on plugs in my office. And I was able to just switch back and forth between the 2 tools. So if you're interested, I'll put links in the bottom of my description box. And let's get back to crafting. Now let's add some embellishments to our bunnies and our carrots. For the carrot, I'm just going to do a jute twine bow. And we're just going to glue that onto the top. Once we've done that, I'm taking my little hot gun and we're going to add the little pom-poms to our bunnies. To attach these bunnies, instead of hot gluing them to our surface, I'm going to use some magnets. And these magnets I got last year from Amazon. I like them because they're really flat, and I've used them in the past because they're the perfect size for Scrabble tiles. So these were left over from a craft that I had used for that. I like the thickness. They're really, really thin. So this makes it look like you've glued them onto something, but you haven't. What to magnet these cute ornaments on? Well, I found these adorable signs at Dollar Tree, and all I needed to do was flip them over. Yep, that's it. And these magnet right onto these little signs. And this is a cute little trio set that we can use for Easter. Or what I was thinking is we could make more of these fun ornaments and we could magnet them onto this cute little sign for different seasons. We could do shamrocks, we could do flowers, we could do Christmas ornaments. We could do whatever we like and we could just flip these around all year round. Up next, I'm going to show you how to take these little carrots and make a cute little carrot patch. So I'm taking these carrots that I got at the Dollar Tree and I'm putting a few of them on a paintable surface. I'm taking some Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and we're taking a big round brush and just going to dry brush these carrots to give them a little bit more of a muted look. When I'm done painting these carrots, I remove the little pieces of stem from these carrots. Next, I grabbed this fun boxwood that I got at Walmart, and I absolutely love this boxwood. And I'm going to dry brush some little pieces of boxwood as well. And what is great about these little carrots is there's going to be like a little hole left over where the old stems were once at. And all you have to do is take a little bit of hot glue and you can just add those boxwoods to the top, and it elevates these carrots to a whole new look.
But I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I walk by something at the Dollar Tree and I'm like, what could I do with that? I really think that piece is so cute. And this is one of those pieces that I kept walking by and I put it down like 3 times and I finally am like, no, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to take this home and we're going to find a way to incorporate this into a craft. So I started out by just painting the whole entire thing using the color Elephant by Waverly Chalk Paint. So for this next step here, I'm using a self-adhesive stencil, and I had gotten the stencil back in the fall from Amazon, and I'll put a link of it in my description box below for you guys. Using some redesigned chalk paste in the color Vintage Lace, and we'll just squeegee that over the top of our stencil. And once we've gotten that squeegeed over the top, I'm just going to peel that away. After our paint has dried from the stencil, I grab my Waverly Chalk Paint in the color Plaster again, and using a dry brush, I'm going to dry brush over the top of the roof. And now it's time to plant our patch and add those carrots right back in. Doesn't this little patch look so perfect? I love how this turned out.